What's up, everyone? This is going to be the first episode of the members only side of this channel, and I'm calling it a fly on the wall because it's just going to be a couple of people just having a general discussion about life or just other various topics that may come across our paths. And I feel like this is a good outlet for a lot of us where we don't have a lot of people that are like-minded, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation and this content. And in this first episode, I have JT with me, and we have just an amazing discussion about a bunch of various topics, including Bible translations and other such like things. And with all that being said, let's get started.
Y'all ready? Let's go.
So, did you see, or if you haven't, check out that new video I just posted?
Yeah, the Book of Eli one? Yeah, I shared it.
No, not that one. That's a short. I posted
Oh,
another.
okay. Yeah, tell me about did you get my connection? I thought it was interesting you were talking about tell me about the Guy Fawkes thing.
Yeah, so uh, Guy Fawkes was apparently like a Jesuit, obviously a part of the Roman Catholic institution, and the Jesuit society. They used to be called the Society of Jesus. Actually, they still are,
Mhm.
and so they were just literally plotting the death of King James, and they got caught, and um and yeah, it's just I think it's like a miracle of God. That's the way I look at it. I got a few comments in the video, and they're still saying like, oh, King James was this or that, but um like I've watched a lot of documentaries and done a lot of research throughout the years, and even how they they the last final thing of draft, I should say, of the King James, they got, I think it was like 47 different scholarly people who were very, very bright, spoke multiple languages, and they all split up into equal groups. So say, like, we'll just say 48 for math's sake, and then you split up into four different groups, 12 people, and they're independent of one another. And so they're coming up with their own conclusions, and then they come back together at the end. That way there's no real like biases and stuff like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's kind of how that came along, and I just find it interesting too, like I had mentioned in the video. So actually, if you didn't know, there was actually six English Bibles before the King James.
Yeah, I do know that. That's why sometimes people they get they get cross with me when I say that no, I it's not my favorite translation because it's harder for me to understand. So I mean like it's not I'm not one of the people who think like that it's there's something wrong with it, but yeah, it's just harder for me to read. So like that me personally, again, I don't have any issues with the King James only people, other
Yeah.
than they have issues with me, is that the past bunch of years I've been reading a different translation every year.
Hmm.
I just go through and read a different one. So like I said, I and it is funny like that sometimes people do get so dogmatic about the King James Bible, and I'm like, but I've come to a lot of the same conclusions as you. So why do you think that like the version I'm using is like the devil, the devilry? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that sometimes it's like the Holy Spirit is our guide and our teacher through these things. So I mean, I think it's fine if people want to use the King James only Bible. But yes, I've seen that. Yeah, that it's the seventh English translation. So then when
Yeah.
somebody says that's the only good one, you're like, well, what about the other ones? Like so.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, so is the Geneva Bible? Is that a lot of people have been talking about that one over the past year or two.
Yeah. So I think that one was probably right before the King James, but I was
It
gonna
was
share.
15. It was 1500 and something. I think they date that one.
Yeah, so I'm going to share with you a verse. It's Psalm 12 verses 6, which is interesting to me, and you've read this, you've heard it before, but it says, "The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times." And I just find it interesting that language, the words of the Lord are pure and it's purified 7 times, and I just I was like, wow, the King James is a seventh one, you know? And
Mhm.
apparently, so obviously this is a issue of debate, you know, it's been going on forever. Um, but the like with the King James, they didn't like change or take any like doctrines or stuff like that out of it. What it was is just like punctuation and spelling. Because even in the King James, there's some spelling in there that like we don't use. Like if you like the word labor, it's O-U-R, and
Mhm.
we spell it O-R. And then like magic is with a K, and music is with a K, not a C. And there's just, or it might be CK, something like that. But
Mhm.
there's different spellings and stuff, and so what else is interesting is like, you know, like a lot of the these, thous, ye, and stuff like that. Like
Oh,
that
yeah.
was those were put in there not because that's like how they spoke at the time, but it was literally for understanding. And so like ye means plural, like, so if it's a Y, like ye or you, it's plural. If it's thee or thou, it's singular. So they did that for a reason, to help the understanding of the reader and kind of be truer to the original language, because we're kind of limited
Mhm.
when you cross over the languages. And so like um like a lot of the, well, actually all of the newer versions, they don't have that in there. They just say you or your. But that could be either singular or plural. But like say in the King James, it specifically tells you if it's singular or
Right.
plural. And there's a lot of that has to do with like grammar and just English and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I, actually watched a Wes Huff video, you know, as he's been on everybody's, For You feeds lately with his, you know, crushing Billy Carson and then going on Rogan.
Hmm.
And so I saw a video saying that he does not recommend the King James Bible, and he was saying that he reads it, but that one of the reasons he was saying, because he was like actually going through some different words that that don't mean the same thing as they did when they wrote it. And I think that's kind of like that's my position based on it. And obviously Wes Huff is it's just some other guy. He's not like,
Yeah.
you know, he's got his opinions, and that's all he was giving. He wasn't trying to say like his way was the only right way. But that's kind of what, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like that there's so many things in the Bible that are already a little bit difficult to understand, and then so when
Yeah.
you add a layer on like that, you're reading a translation that's not really the language we speak. You know, that's the way I view it. It's like we don't speak like that, so like my mind doesn't think like that, and yet to those people when it was written or translated, yeah, ye's and thous and these and the way it's written, like they would have known, yeah, like that makes sense, but that's the
Hmm.
first I've ever heard that, you know? So, like, I didn't even know what that meant. It just to me, it does sound more poetic and it does sound good when people can recite the
Yeah.
King James. But I'm saying, especially when I tried to read it and I stutter over my words when I'm reading the Bible aloud anyways, it's tough
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. And you know what is, um it's written in such a way too where it may sound crazy, but it's easier to remember scripture out of the King James than any other version of the Bible, just because the amount of syllables and stuff that's in it. Which
Mhm.
it
Yeah, I
sounds
could hear
crazy.
that.
It sounds crazy, but it actually really is true. And the King James Bible actually reads at a lower level than all the newer ones too. So like say the King James Bible is read at a fifth grade level, whereas you get some of the newer versions and they're like eighth grade. And
Hmm.
so like for example, like my children, they've been reading it since they could read, you know, and they don't have an
Mhm.
issue with it. It's just a matter of like, I guess, getting used to it or something maybe, because
Mhm.
I know what you're saying. When I first started reading it, I was kind of like that, but I just kind of, I guess I just pressed through that, and just because of the research that I did, I just chose to stay away from like the newer ones, because like really it's not debatable about where the newer versions came from. Westcott and Hort were um, the probably two main components of that, like in the 1800s. And that's crazy. Like, you know, we're talking about the timeline
Yeah.
stuff. In the
Mhm.
1800s, they're really like pushing out a lot of newer versions of the
Mhm.
Bible and stuff like that, especially like Westcott and Hort. And this is this may sound crazy to you, but they also had connections to Charles Darwin. I don't know if you knew that.
Well, I mean, all these people are typically connected, so it doesn't
Yeah. It
surprise
doesn't
me.
surprise yeah. So, yeah, they also had connections to Charles Darwin at the time, which obviously we know what came out of that.
hmm
So,
Yeah,
but
I want to go back to something about the Guy Fawkes thing though. I
yeah.
was just thinking about it, like just the movie, the V for Vendetta, and I mentioned that it came from a comic book when we were texting back and forth the other day. I think it's pretty interesting that what his goal is to do in that movie, and of course, thinking like the whole idea of like the 1800s and the maybe the erasing of history. Like so in the movie, and I'm not sure if the original Guy Fawkes had this same kind of goal, but he was literally trying to blow up this old world building, right? He was trying to blow
Mhm.
up the Parliament building.
Right.
And that's what happens at the end of V for Vendetta, right? They blow
Yep.
up this awesome building.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird, it's like so obviously it was supposed to be symbolic of taking this government down, but obviously we know that even based on the story that it comes from the movie, those people didn't build that building. So why would you blow up the beautiful building? Oh, because it's symbolic of something else. Yeah, sure it is. Maybe it is symbolic of them trying to destroy the past.
Yeah.
So we don't know anything about that stuff. I never really made that connection before, but it is interesting in the comic book. The comic book is written by Alan Moore, and Alan Moore is an occultist, and he's like
Uh,
one of the most famous comic book writers there is. But yeah, like you listen to him talk, and he's not shy about telling you that like he uses magic, like the Lester Crowley kind, and I saw an interview in a documentary by the Good Fight Ministries. They had a really interesting one. I think they called this documentary, it was Hollywood's, was it Gnostic Hollywood's, something like that, something against God. I forget the exact title. Sorry about that.
you're right.
But he mentioned it being possessed by a demon. It was like the worst month of his life until it basically just let it take over him. And then of course he starts making all the content he does. Anyways, so in the movie V for Vendetta, the character V is really, they don't really say who he is. But in the comic book, it's straight up like he's the devil. I mean, he's
Really?
obviously coming with this kind of anarchy spirit,
Mhm.
and but it is interesting to think like, yeah, so then he wants to blow up this building. He's the devil. Why does he want to blow up the building? Maybe it's to again erase the past of potentially the millennial reign and what was before, to write a new history, a brand new one, a
Mhm.
fictional one.
Yeah. And obviously, it's Hollywood and they're trying to make it entertaining and stuff, but it portrays him obviously like he's the good guy and he's trying to rebel against a government that's a tyrannical government, and it's just
Yeah.
it's almost like, the 1984 Big Brother type thing, you know what I'm saying? And
Definitely.
and so it's portraying him like he was the good guy, obviously, but like really he was trying to blow up the king.
Well, it's kind of like that whole thing that the mythos that's kind of in the culture right now is the anti-heroes. Taylor
Mhm.
Swift had an anti-hero song. So Venom, the movie Venom is about an anti-hero, even though Venom was a villain in the comic books. Deadpool was a villain in the comic books, and now he's the good guy. But it's not that they're good; it's that the other people they're fighting against are bad. And so, so V would probably be like your anti-hero because
Right,
the government he's fighting against in the movie is evil. I
right.
mean, they're not, they try to like over there. It's obviously some kind of far right type government. And even I think the beginning they showed like a Rush Limbaugh, kind of almost like a British Rush Limbaugh versus like, like combined with like Piers Morgan. And
Yeah.
he's like against foreigners and he's like a Christian guy, but he's really not a Christian. And so, yeah, like that, I do think that that's probably what they're showing you is kind of that Hegelian dialect because it's like we could agree with people we don't agree with about the government being bad. And so just take it down, right? And then what? Right? Like, and then what? So then you establish this new thing. And obviously that's probably what they would not agree on. Because, yeah, because that's literally what he's doing is obviously when you think like the V, it could just as easily be an A. and it's anarchy. So that's what
Yeah.
that's obviously what he's promoting in the
Mhm.
movie. And it is
Eh
interesting. It's kind of like, yeah, that's that idea of like that when you have like the right left dichotomy, right? That they want you somewhere in the middle, right? So they're
Mhm.
going to push you each way to the solution that they've got picked out. And yeah, it is interesting that the devil character is basically the one who's, yeah, he's fighting against a tyrannical government, which is definitely tyrannical in the movie.
Mhm.
And then, but then, yeah, to what end?
Yeah. That's interesting because I didn't even think about that. You were saying about the V, you flip it around and it looks like that A
It's
for
just an anarchy symbol.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting for sure. But yeah, I mean, I I don't know. I just yesterday I was just trying to figure things out in my head and just like knowing like the little bit of history that I do and study that I've done in that past. I'm like, well, where does that all fit in like for us? Because I
Mm-hmm.
know that like those dates are not right,
Mm-mm.
obviously. I'm
Mm-mm.
just wondering, was that before or after? Or like say it would make sense because we have talked about it too in the last podcast, like, really the Bible could be used to control people too. And like how you said, well, I'm God's anointed, you can't question me, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And that's basically how I kind of look at it, where you have this book, but yet like even in the book of Eli, he gets the book finally and it's in Braille. You know,
That's
it's
the
just
part. That's the part I was just like, bruh.